Hello and welcome to Viewpoint. Last week we had a really interesting discussion around artificial intelligence and the impact it's having on our lives, both the good and the bad. Well, this week we're continuing the discussion with members of the panel representing different sectors. We've got law, education, financial services and the creative industry. So how do we harness the benefits of AI but guard against the social harms? Well, last week we had lots of questions, so do keep them coming in. You can email viewpoint@gbc.gi, that's viewpoint@gbc.gi, if you'd like to send me a question. Let me just introduce the panel to you. So we have someone who's probably very familiar to you, Joe Abigail from Rock Learning. We've got lawyer Nick Cruz, KC. Stuart Harrison, founding trustee of Europort Digital Skills Academy. We have another Stuart over here, Stu Whitwell. He's the creative director and a business owner as well. And at the end, we have Hugh Winey, who is a financial services professional. Thank you all very much for joining me. So as I did last week with our panel, by way of introduction, can you just give us a short intro into sort of what you do and how AI is touching your life?
Okay, so I'm from the education space, particularly learning and development. I do a lot of corporate training in Gibraltar, public and private sector, and I work very closely with AI trainers who I bring to Gibraltar. I have one coming next week to provide very practical courses to kind of take all the fear out of AI and get people using it.
Ian Campbell, we'll be hearing from him later on in the programme. Nick?
Yeah, it's law, primarily litigation, but generally law. Interaction with AI is now almost daily. It's whether it's client-driven or it's actually used by us because we're having to advance at the same pace. So interesting development, opportunities, risks, both.
Okay, and education, Stuart.
There's a lot going on. I think education, obviously a former teacher now running the Skills Academy. We're seeing so much coming out of education, good and for bad. I think used properly, it's an amazing tool that's just going to enhance education, learning and teaching on scale that you can't even imagine. The Academy is also looking to teaching skills more for younger students, from young age up to even adult learning. We're looking at that too. Again, it's really exciting times.
Education is a subject all on its own, isn't it? Law is too as well, to be honest, to be fair, but education impacts so many people. Right, you're in the creative sector.
Yes.
That's also being very impacted by AI. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I think it's, I wouldn't be understated if I said it's a seminal moment for the creative arts, because what AI is bringing to the table from a production perspective is a huge array of tools that now allow us to produce things of Hollywood level from places like Gibraltar. And that's what we've been doing now for a number of years. AI is advancing so much now that film, video, music video, stuff like that, music production, design, every element of the creative, the creative kind of workflow, if you like, has been touched by AI and has really kind of enhanced it. There are absolutely some negatives, but there are a lot of positives in what you could do now that you weren't able to do before. So it's quite significant.
Look forward to hearing more about that. Now, Hugo, you're in the financial services industry. Tell us about how it's impacting both for the good and the bad.
So obviously there's huge positives to it in terms of efficiencies, in terms of cutting down the time spent doing long, laborious manual tasks. But on the flip side, there's huge risks around. I think across every industry there's the data concern. But in addition to that, things like fraud, the ability to create deep fakes, fake people's voices we were talking about earlier. So there's definitely a big balance in how this technology is adopted for the good and for the bad.
And one of the big topics that came up last week, Nick, was legislation. So we are going to dive into that, hopefully. We've got our lawyer on the panel, so we'll try and get as much out of you as we can. But first of all, if you did miss last week's programme, here's a little introduction into AI. My colleague Shalina Asamal put this report together.
Using artificial intelligence to its full potential in a responsible way is something many businesses across industries are trying to get to grips with. It's been likened to the advent of the computer in the 90s, with the equal potential for many to get ahead or get left behind. Businesses on the Rock are approaching it in different ways.
I come from a financial services background, so it's a regulated environment. Currently, my organisation has developed its own GPT tool. It has limited functionality so far, but it's going to be evolving, ever evolving. So if it's to understand documentation, prepare certain types of documentation, standard sort of documentation, if it's, for example, the preparation of minutes of meetings, there are different functionalities that are already in place, but it will be much more significant in the future.
So I think in the past, if you joined us, for example, straight out of university, you might perform a lot of repetitive tasks as you build up a skill set and, you know, for example, reading hundreds and hundreds of documents, performing hundreds and hundreds of document matches. Now a lot of that repetitive work can be somewhat automated or at least sped up with the use of GenAI tools. How it's going to change in the future, I think we will be, as we employ people out of university, we'll be looking at them doing a much more advanced role, almost sort of akin to a sort of management role.
There's no use having the tools without the knowledge on how to properly use them. We asked ChatGPT how to get the most out of it.
The more specific you can be in your prompts, the better. For example, if you want a summary of a particular section of a document, just tell me exactly which section or what kind of detail you're after. That helps me narrow down and focus on what you really need. 2, highlight key terms or context. If a document is long or complex, point out the key terms or the main context that you care about most. That way I know which parts to pay the most attention to and can be more precise in my responses. 3, ask for verification or double checks. Feel free to build in a quick double check step.
From day one, we implemented quite strict business rules and minimum training requirements to make sure that our staff use it in a responsible manner. So everything that we create from using GenAI always has to go through at least 1, if not 2 levels of human review. So we'll never completely rely on the output.
AI claims to be aware of its limitations too.
Very often chat doesn't admit that it's wrong at first until I really double down on this. This is a real problem when it comes to using it in a professional setting.
Absolutely, I get where you're coming from. It's a very valid concern. And I'll be the first to say that AI models like me can sometimes get things wrong or present them with too much confidence. It's something we're always working to improve. In a professional setting, the best practice is definitely to treat AI as a helpful assistant, but to double check important facts, especially if they're critical to a decision.
There are organisations that are using it, but as I say, it's massive scale, like people that are not using it at all to people that have whole dedicated departments. So, but I haven't actually seen anyone, even those that we've had today, that are using it with all the oversight and everything that they should be using it with.
Like many new technologies, it's about the way it's used. But at the rate it's growing, there is urgency in understanding that as soon as possible.
Joe, tell us about that technology there. It sounded human, to be honest.
So that was an AI assistant that Ian, the trainer that was featured, he actually built prior to his visit to Gibraltar last time. So he's based in Guernsey. He wanted to learn a lot more about the Gibraltar financial services landscape, really the regulatory landscape. And so he built that assistant to teach him really about Gibraltar. And we saw in the clip Shalina asking questions to it, because you can, once you've built the assistant, you can then ask the assistant, well, how can you help me? What can you do? And I think it really helps people on a practical level understand how to start using AI and making it a lot more accessible.
Right, so these can be bespoke to whatever company, whatever the need.
Yes, so like he created me one this week as well, in advance of him coming next week, talking about the different courses that are on offer, who should attend, what they'll gain from it. He actually has about 10, he told us himself last time. He has one that will read through all his emails for him and get rid of all the rubbish and draft replies to the others, prioritise, and he's taught his AI assistant to do that. So depending on what your job is, what your role is, you can create AI assistants to help you, not to do your job for you, but to assist you in your role.
Okay, so let's just go to a question here that's come in from somebody who is asking, let's have a look, sorry, I just got rid of that question there. Where are we? Yeah, I do. Oh, no, you know why? That's because quite a few other viewpoints, other questions have just suddenly poured in. Okay, so here's a question from someone. Has there been any consideration as to what the AI generated from the centre would be put to use for? I think it would be important to know this, as we seem to be sleepwalking into an age where immoral tech business leaders and autocrats use AI as a tool to dismantle democratic systems. This is actually a topic that came up last week. What do we say about this in terms of how we guard against this? You're an expert.
I mean, well, use that term lightly, but I think that's a very loaded question. I think one of the key concerns that we've seen around it is the prevalence of misinformation, the prevalence of the ability to generate something that feels real is completely fictional, and there is obviously a huge concern around the way that technology is deployed, the way that information gets shared. And we live in a world now where we have access, we have a little thing in our pockets that gives us access to all the information that exists in the world. And at some point, it comes down to our institutions to be able to shape that and guide that in a way that doesn't erode confidence in our institutions, in a way that supports the technology's positive uses and minimizes those potential for harm.
Are we becoming over-reliant on technology? And I say this because I have just lost access to the Viewpoint email again. So I'm going to ask people to please email news@gbc.gi, news@gbc.gi, because I have just been locked out of my Viewpoint. But it is a point, though, isn't it? We've become so over-reliant on technology. I know humans make mistakes as well, but are we becoming too reliant?
But Ross, this is not a question of us sort of taking a deep breath and waiting. I think Elon Musk and others describe this as a tsunami of technology. And it's every single day. I mean, even in 6 months, in my profession, I've noticed how it was a subject matter that we would sort of discuss occasionally. And actually now, in any one day, at least 2 or 3 times we engage with AI, but not necessarily always in a positive way. Sometimes it's because someone has used AI. Other times, even as an example, 2 weeks ago in court, I was up against a person who had, he was a lawyer, but he was a litigant in person, and he had all his arguments prepared by AI. They weren't bad.
Can you tell? I mean...
Yeah, you can, because they were wrong. But they
they were wrong.
They were wrong.
This is really worrying.
But they were quite good. I would equate it to a lawyer maybe of 1 year's experience who sort of almost got there, but they were wrong. And it had the consequences on the individual. He lost and he got cost awarded. But there's a danger of relying on AI. Yeah. And what AI isn't doing at the moment is not picking up the nuance. And the difficulty is that it's going to learn quick. And then you're going to say, well, hang on a second, it's not a lawyer of 1 year's experience. It's much better than that. So we've got to be careful. I think it does create opportunity, but I think the question was all about guardrails. Do we need guardrails? Yes, and it's not something we can do in 3 or 4 years. I think those need to come soon.
Stuart, I want to ask, just picking up on what Nick said here, we see AI advancing at such an incredible rate, and you spoke about noticing the mistakes immediately, but, in 6 months' time, in a year's time, is it going to be impossible to, are there going to be less errors on AI? It all depends on how much data is actually input into it, doesn't it?
There could be more.
But what about those hallucinations?
I think
will they continue?
I think Karen raised that last week with hallucinations. That's something to be careful of. I think it's a tool and it's a co-pilot, but it's definitely not something that's going to replace a human. And to kind of think it's going to replace a human, I think is wrong. And again, as we're all saying here, it does make mistakes. Therefore, we need the human checker in place. But then again, the over-reliance of it, we've got to be careful how we over-rely on something which we know could be actually wrong. So again, it's knowing its limitations, using it to make us all much more efficient, much more effective, better, to put more time into the jobs that we want to do, and obviously
you say that you need human, it doesn't get the nuance yet, and you do need the human input into it so that you understand how decisions are being made and all that reasoning. But sometimes, at the end of the day, it's about money, isn't it? It's about saving money, and a lot of industries will be looking at how they can cut costs. We heard in the news yesterday that Amazon are cutting 16,000 jobs. Those are efficiency savings. I don't know if it's to do with AI or not, but that's what's been implied. AI is taking over, human jobs. I mean, surely this is something that we've all got to be worried about.
Then on the other side, if you're overriding too much and makes a mistake reputation-wise, you may lose everything. And that's a big part as well. So again, it's not just about, yeah, you can cut down money today, but it may have a much longer term effect on you in the future. Therefore, again, it's about knowing its limitations, and again, that risk assessment and risk you're taking by actually...
and it's artificial.
Yeah.
You know, it is artificial. We have to remember it's artificial intelligence.
Yeah, well,
It's
I
not
think
a real human.
Shalina raised in her report there that you can raise the fact that they've made a mistake because you recognise that they've made a mistake. But what if you don't recognise they've made a mistake and you take it as your young law person did?
Yeah, well, I think what I'm saying is make a mistake now. What will it be like in 2 or 3 years' time? It may or may not make mistakes. But in terms of employment, myself and my partner went to a legal partner went to a legal conference in October, and the theme was AI. We had an in-house counsel for OpenAI, and the key question was what is the future for young lawyers? And it was, well, you'll have 2 types of lawyers: experienced lawyers and lawyers who know how to use AI, and no one in between, which is why we've got to embrace it. But it was interesting that it's 120 law firms, 50 of them from America. The American firms had cut down recruitment by as much as 40%, 50% in terms of young lawyers because of the use of AI. So, there is real impact, I think, and we've got to get ahead of that tsunami wave, or at least ride with it.
OK, let's go on to this side. I want to ask you, Stu, your industry is being very impacted by AI. I mean, a lot of creative people are having their work reproduced. People are being put out of business because why use humans when you can use AI? How's it I mean, I know you've used it to very positive effect to you.
Yes.
In fact, we've got an example of your brilliant film called Drive for Your Life, which has won 8 awards.
It's up for 8 awards, yeah. Actually, there's a bit of...
So you've embraced it.
Absolutely, we're early adopters.
How long did this take you to make?
So probably all about 2 months. The equivalent sort of Hollywood film, and not that it's the same level, but the technology will be at the same level within 18 months. This was the first film that we produced. In 2 months, it took us to produce a 10-minute film. Now, the reason it took 2 months rather than 2 weeks was because when we started working on this, the technology wasn't there. It moved so rapidly between 2 months. So the first month, we could create images. Within a couple of weeks, we could make those images move. So the Formula 1 cars that you're seeing could drive. And the dinosaurs that you're seeing could walk. But they couldn't interact. They couldn't collide. People couldn't talk. And push forward a month and a half, and all of a sudden, we could do perfect lip syncing. We could do, collisions and flames and all sorts of things. It's moving that fast.
But you're talking about it in a very positive way. But of course, we've seen a lot of fake videos, fake news. For you, do you find it easy to spot? Are AI videos very easy to spot?
So the disposable content, some sort of meme content that is creating all the noise, right? Which a lot of people call AI.
They're a bit
slop.
rough around the edges,
and those are people experimenting, having a bit of fun with it. New technology is there. It's free. There's no barrier to entry. You can just ask for anything and you will get it. So people are really using it for, mischievous purposes, right? Very, very easy to spot, and there's good and the bad. There's fun with it, and there's stuff that's crossing the line. You see a lot of that, particularly on Grok. Other platforms have got guardrails and moderation. Some don't. But the really professional stuff, and there's probably a 1% within the creative industry worldwide that are adopting AI at the level we're trying to. They're producing Hollywood standard, London, UK production standard.
We could be a hub
films.
here, couldn't we, for that? We talk about financial services, but this sort of industry. I've got a question for Hugo now, actually, because this person says AI is a highly technical and rapidly evolving field. While ethics, law and commercial perspectives are important, why has GBC not complemented these roles with experts who have deep practical experience in AI engineering, model development and real-world deployment to ensure decisions are informed by true technical expertise rather than high-level tool usage? Well, Hugo is our expert. And in fact, you're leading a workshop on this at the university.
Yes, we are. Again, that's very much from I'd call myself a layman from the technical side. It's very much about equipping people within the workforce with practical knowledge on how to use these tools. I think it's a very good question. It's a very good point, but I'm not sure how well I would go up against a PhD in computer science at this round table. So there's an element of, yes, of course, having people that understand the algorithms that sit behind these large language models and all the technical complexity that goes with that. But at the end of the day, these are industries that the technology is being deployed in. Industry professionals, and we've got a great array here, are the ones that are seeing the consequences of how this technology is being used, both for the good and some of the not so good stuff. So I think you do need definitely both perspectives, but somebody who's highly technical is not going to be able to give you the same perspective of what the potential impacts are of that technology in financial services. I mean, we were just talking about the spoofing and these AI-generated images and videos. Well, a lot of the high-frequency trading firms, you know, they will be trawling the internet for news and signals. They'll be trading on that. You could have an event like the 2011 flash crash caused by something that was AI-generated, something that was artificial.
That was
and
actually
it's
very
computers
scary.
seeing what other computers are doing, and effectively you get a bit of a death spiral.
That is quite a nightmare scenario. Okay, let's have a look at Latanya. She has sent us a question. She says, following the UK's new AI skills hub for free workforce training, what AI education strategy is Gibraltar planning for schools, professionals and the community? Is there one?
Right now, right now, advanced education and schools, right now, it's more of an actual review stage. It's being used, different levels within the schools. I know there's been a few workshops run in inserts to actually introduce again, to see some sort of basic level of AI in the classroom. I know there's intentions to bring UK experts again from the same hub to start running workshops in the inserts days in Gibraltar as well. And then if you want to look further afield, over in Asia, I think schooling with AI has just gone to a whole brand new level. Before I came out this morning and this afternoon, actually doing some research. And what they're doing in South Korea, Japan, Singapore, China, you look and it's scary.
But isn't there a concern in education that you're eroding critical thinking? I mean, that's a part of education in itself, encouraging people to learn for themselves, think for themselves. AI is doing it for you now.
But it depends how you actually deploy it. And that's part of the educational strategy and program has to be put in place, the policies, to show. And the stuff I've been reading, especially in Asia, is to use as a tool.
Yeah.
And it seems to be the future workforce are going to have to use AI. So the schooling policy has got to be about how you use AI, again, correctly, within parameters, within policy, within the safeguards we're all discussing here, but still use it, become a more effective worker. And if you can enhance a workforce that can be more efficient, you're going to attract more business and more jobs in your roads because you are embracing an inevitable technology.
Okay, so down the line, let me ask you this question. Down the line, why do we need teachers where we can just go onto our computers and get taught everything by AI?
You can't.
I mean,
you cannot replace a teacher. You can't replace a teacher.
Well,
You
I
can't
hope
replace
they- I hope
human
you couldn't.
interaction, but the human interaction and those interpersonal relationships, you're not going to get that from an AI in the near future. I mean, I know people are going to shout at me because their AIs are being used to combat loneliness in the UK with old people.
Yeah.
They're having their own agents that they can chat to and everything, and it does have very good uses. But, you know, the critical thinking you mentioned, those interpersonal relationships are crucial. And it's really about using AI to assist you, not to replace you. And I think that's the key message.
But
really.
it almost feels like the monster, you know, the whole horse has bolted, you know, the monster's out there and it's, can we control it?
But the monster, or I wouldn't call it a monster, you know, it's out there. This is not
An entity, this force.
AI is out there,
Yeah.
and you know whether it translates to robotics, where driverless cars that's becoming a reality now, you know, it's there. So this isn't about trying to control it. Perhaps it's trying to control people's usage of it. And I think, you know, if we start looking at it and say, well, what do we all have to do? Well, first we have to embrace the technology because it's not going. Then we all have to work together and educate ourselves. And I think we need to have some basic rules that are about the people that are using it, not about the technology. We'll not control it. You know, it's just not going to happen. So it's perhaps not so difficult to bring laws that say, you know, if you use AI for the wrong purpose, there's a consequence. That's not difficult because you're controlling people's behaviour, but you won't control the technology. It's just beyond it.
I do want to talk about controls and controlling people's behaviour with legislation. But first of all, let's go to Ian Campbell. Shalina spoke to Ian Campbell earlier on this week. No, I think it was last week that she spoke to him. He's an artificial intelligence consultant and he recently visited the Rock for a workshop. on using AI tools, and he was brought over by Rock Learning, yourself, also in collaboration with PwC. He talks about policy, which is something that I'd like to get into in a moment. So Shalina Asmal first asked him which industries AI was most useful in.
Any knowledge industry, so any industry that processes knowledge, so that's legal, financial services, government as well, that processes knowledge. So these tools are coming in to help those industries process knowledge at a much more efficient rate.
We often see with AI, for example, ChatGPT, it can get things wrong. And there is an issue sometimes where it can make up information when it doesn't have the answer for you, and often is only called out on it when you pick it up yourself. So how do you deal with issues of accuracy and oversight of these models?
That's a good question. A very important question. And yes, it does give wrong information sometimes, and that can be for a number of reasons. One is it's picking up the wrong information. So if it's picking up the wrong information, you need to be aware of why is it doing that, where is it getting that information from, or it's picking up information that it can't read properly. So if it's a PDF document, a legal document, and it's 300 pages long, it's not going to read it. It can read up to about 50, 60 pages of PDF, but not 300. So it's not reading the document correctly. So you need to convert that document into a format it can understand, or you're prompting it incorrectly. So if you're not asking it the right question the right way, then it will give you not quite the right answer. So it's normally one of those three reasons.
But how do you sort of deal with that? Because you might end up with a situation, if you don't realise the inaccuracy, where misinformation is spreading or things are going out wrong.
Yeah, so you have to remember that this is like an assistant. It's there to help you. And like an assistant, you are the higher authority, not the machine. So as an assistant gives you information, you have to check that information to make sure it's correct, but not rely on it, just like a human assistant. So you do have to be careful and check the information.
And how are workplaces doing that? What types of policies are we seeing to ensure the oversight we're talking about?
Normally that's training. So you train your people that are using AI systems to understand the limitations of the tool, to understand how to convert documents properly into its knowledge so it can read those documents properly, to understand how much capability it's got, when it's giving you answers, to understand whether those answers are correct or not. So if you're working compliance and you've built a compliance assistant to help you, you need to be the higher authority in the machine. So it's there to help you give compliance answers, but you need to check that it's giving you the right answer, just like a human assistant.
And what would your advice be for those skeptics, those who understand it is moving quickly and we probably do need to get on this bandwagon before it's too late, but we're really scared and concerned about our jobs, our creativity, and just moving forward in general?
So that's very difficult. I mean, I would say try and get on board, try and use the technology. It's very, very easy to use. Just make sure you're safe on it. Don't upload information which is confidential. If you're working for a company and you're using your own private version of OpenAI, ChatGPT or Gemini or Grok, do not upload your company's confidential information into your AI. So try and keep things confidential with it. Don't share too much personal information with it because the model might learn from you. So you have to make sure you put the right security in place when you're setting these models up.
Do companies need to have some form of AI policy at the moment?
100%. So if you haven't got an AI policy right now, write one. Because if you're not using AI, certainly the employees that are working for you are using AI without your consent. So you need an AI policy to make it clear what you can and cannot do.
And where do companies begin with doing that?
Ask ChatGPT.
All right. Everyone's worried that they're going to get replaced at work.
Yes. I think that is inevitably going to happen. So it's not me just saying that. The industry recognises that in the next 3 years there is going to be a wholesale change within the job market. And I think this will create a lot of new opportunities that we don't know about today. A bit like the computing revolution in the 1990s. We didn't really know what was going to happen with the internet then. And with this technology, we don't really know what the future looks like. We know the knowledge economy is going to become a lot cheaper. And we know there's going to be lots of new jobs, but we don't quite know what they are.
So which jobs do you think are out the window now?
So it's controversial, but I think if you're an advisory firm and you're selling knowledge on a time base, those that industry, that knowledge-based industry, is under threat. So if you're providing accounting services, legal services, it's that industry that I think is under threat from this technology.
That was AI consultant Ian Campbell. I'd like to hear your views on that.
Don't listen to him.
Your industry is under threat.
Don't listen to him, at least for the next few years till I retire. Look, there's a change. There's a big change. I mean, we're in our firm, and I think some of the other leading firms in Jib are doing the same. We're adopting a legal-based AI tool, and in our case, it's one called Harvey, after Harvey from Suits. And just to give you a bit of a feel, well, they've called it that.
Did they really call it after Harvey Specter?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And it's used by very substantial firms all over the world. Just to give you a bit of a feel, to do a claim that might take a lawyer 10 to 15 hours, 10 to 20 to 25 seconds
But
is
is
what
it
it'll
correct?
take. Well, the document itself won't be, as I said earlier, it'll probably be 80%, 90% correct. But you see, that requires 20, 25 seconds, then a more senior experienced lawyer looks at it, spends an hour or two. In the past, you'd have had 10, 15 hours from a junior lawyer, and you'd still have the 1 or 2 hours. So the people that are at the biggest threat, really, I mean, my son's studying law and so on, and young lawyers, how do you get them experienced? How do you make sure that they actually, succeed in getting that? How do you get young accountants experienced? So the threat is there, is how we turn it from a threat to an opportunity, which we can. Potentially, legal costs come down substantially. Everybody would welcome that.
Does that get passed on to the poor person paying for your services?
Well, that's exactly what should happen. So what you end up with, hopefully, is doing many more things, many more cases, but all at a cheaper cost. Helps with access to justice, which is increasingly difficult. So there can be good side to this, but there's a challenge, as that gentleman said, for anybody with cognitive, based, I think there's a real challenge here. Because actually this machine is going to do it better and quicker than a person who hasn't yet had enough experience. And it's going to take a bit of time for us to adjust to that. So that is definitely a reality.
Okay, we are going to focus on policy, which is something that Ian Campbell did bring up. But first of all, I want to ask you, teachers weren't mentioned, and I wasn't implying that teachers were under threat, Stuart, but obviously, it's about controlling AI. You've got this lovely map here. Can you just explain to us what you have here? You can hold it up if you like.
No, it's fine. My handwriting's horrible. Rather not. I just obviously scanning around, seeing what the world's doing, and then you just said about teachers that replace teaching. It cannot replace teaching. It can only enhance what the classroom looks like. Again, it can only make teaching learning better. It can make learning a lot more personalised. It could probably cut down time on certain teaching tasks, which would then only give more time to focus on students. Again, as Joe said before, again, that interpersonal thing. AI will never do it.
Yeah.
Not the way a teacher does it, the pastoral care that we have as well. Going to school is not just learning from a textbook, passing exams and away you go. There's a lot more to school.
Human interaction, of course.
The education system offers a lot more than just walking out with GCSEs.
Yeah.
Problem-solving skills, again, communication skills, all these core skills you can't learn from an AI. It's part and parcel.
I think
of being a human
I
being.
watched too many futuristic movies. Was that Logan's Run? Where your society just becomes completely automated, and it is quite scary to think that 50 years. I won't be here in 50 years, but where will we be in 50 years? Stuart, your industry wasn't mentioned there, and neither of your industries were mentioned as...
But I think, it has been absolutely impacted, very negatively, but there's an absolute upside. And Nick's absolutely right about the generation that we are, where we are very fortunate to have all the grounding and the skills that we've learned before AI. Now AI appears and we can enhance ourselves by using that, but we're always grounded in the knowledge that we have. The next generations won't have that, but they'll be straight into AI. So I think there's a real call to action for that kind of upskilling of the younger generations to try and get there, obviously enhanced by AI, but not just solely able to use AI. What I tell anyone in the creative arts, and I think this applies for any type of business these days, about AI, because there's a lot of people that have been taking that position that AI is going to take my job because of all the stuff you've seen online, right? There's been a deluge of some amazing things and some terrible things, to the point where a lot of people that I know working in the arts just go, I can't compete. But the reality is that the creative arts, and I think most businesses as well, still rely on human thinking. Human thinking is powering what the AI is doing. We're making decisions, the AI is crunching, giving us results, but we're We're the creative
Feeding it
director,
in.
if you like. So what I tell people is that, there's a couple of things to embrace. First of all, look around. Can AI enhance your job? Can it help you do things you couldn't do before? If so, jump on it and do them. Can it make you do things better than you did before? Well, absolutely embrace that. And the third one is, can it do parts of your job you don't like to do? And that allows you to then, skill up and do the next bit and improve. Well, those are three things that are very positive. They're going to allow you then to be a master of AI and deliver things faster, cheaper, and better quality for your clients or for your bosses or whoever that you work with, and actually upskill and end up really in a much, much more senior position. The important thing is that we all need to move from thinking that, or being a doer to being a thinker, and allowing AI to do the doing for us. That's key.
Do you want to just pick up on that before we go to a quick break?
Yeah, so I think that's a very salient point, and there's a lot of theory around how the workplace is going to change, especially if you're in a more junior role. You're going from being a producer to suddenly having to check somebody else's work, but that work has been generated by AI. But one of the big concerns is, and we've seen it in the UK and in the US, the graduate job market right now is absolutely brutal because a lot of the firms are cutting that sort of lowest rung. When I started my career, which admittedly wasn't that long ago, I spent hours of my day formatting PowerPoint presentations and meticulously putting together Excel spreadsheets and manually typing in numbers. None of that exists today. But part of that work, I studied mechanical engineering, and the first thing we did when learning technical drawings was physically drawing them. So you learn the intricacies, the rules, and then you move on to the modeling software on a computer. So there needs to be that element of still figuring out a way to give young people that foundational knowledge and understanding, because the people that have had the benefit of learning it sort of the hard way, they're going to retire in 5, 10, 15 years' time, and you're suddenly going to have a cohort of professionals that don't know how to do their job without AI. And then that's where you become really over-reliant on the technology, and you wonder, is the tail wagging the dog in that respect?
Okay, there are, of course, lots of benefits to AI. Nick spoke about efficiencies, and we will be touching on some of those. We'll be talking about controlling it as well with legislation. Do join us after the break. News at gbc.gi if you want to send the panel a question. We'll be back in just a few moments. Hello and welcome back to Viewpoint. We're talking about artificial intelligence and how it's impacting our lives for the good and for the bad. Thank you very much to my panel. Very interesting discussion. I want to talk about something that Ian Campbell raised, which is, I remember having a discussion a few years ago at work about a social media policy. But now we're having this conversation about an AI policy. I mean, how many workplaces have AI policies, Joe?
I think more and more they're realising that they need to have them. Generally, I'm not a fan of policies. I think sometimes policies are put into place to punish people who've done wrong. And so the whole workforce gets punished because a couple of people don't know how to dress or don't know how to use social media at work, and the things that most adults would know how to use and what's appropriate. So I think more and more
There's always one, though, isn't
There's
there?
always one, yes. More and more workplaces are having to set parameters around, accountability, transparency, bias mitigation. I know you had conversations on Viewpoint last week with Leah about how AI is being used, for example, in recruitment. They're scanning your CVs for you. You're being rejected from a job without ever having a chance to speak to a human being. So there needs to be, I think, a lot more enforcement around some of those policies, because some workplaces, they're saying, OK, we don't use AI in our workplace, but then their employees are using it. Whether they're using ChatGPT or uploading client information. So you need to set your data protection parameters that you've spoken about, and general governance, like what is and what is not expected and what is not allowed. Particularly, in a regulated jurisdiction like Gibraltar, it's really crucial that we are protecting ourselves.
A lot of us deal with sensitive private data and information. And, when I was using ChatGPT, I said to it, look, this is very confidential information. Can you guarantee to me that you're not going to share it with anybody else? And it told me yes. So I
it's going to
trusted it.
tell you exactly what you want to hear. It's not going to say, I'm going to send it to Elon Musk tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, I think, first of all, the different ChatGPTs or the different programs that you can use have various governance mechanisms built in. So, for example, Microsoft Copilot and ChatGPT sign up to GDPR. So they do have some data protection parameters. There are others which shall perhaps remain nameless, maybe American ones, Chinese ones, that aren't going to have those same controls. So, and I don't believe that the average Joe public would understand that or would even think to check. I think the most important thing is if you are using it for work purposes and you want to upload data, just anonymise that data first. You know, give it false names or false dates of birth, something to anonymise it.
OK, let's go to financial services. You know, a lot of people have their money or their assets in a financial institution. Can you tell us about what the finance sector is doing in terms of safeguarding
Absolutely.
people's private data and their assets?
I mean, obviously, the whole financial services sector at its core is based on trust. It's based on the trust of clients and users of the services that are provided. And this has been, you know, artificial intelligence in one way or another has been used in financial services for actually quite a long time. If you think back to some of the machine learning models and the algorithmic traders. But it's coming closer and closer to the client-facing side. So there's some large firms in the UK and in the US, they produce custom portfolio updates from your portfolio manager who's talking specifically to you about your investments, about your returns. And it's a really cool piece of technology, right? But the danger around that is how do I know that my sensitive information has been safeguarded correctly? And I think one thing that organizations in the financial services sector, but more broadly, need to be really conscious of is, I think you made this point, if you blanket restrict your staff from using AI tools, they're going to find a workaround. And it's probably a workaround that you don't want them to be using. It's far better to have really clear, safe guardrails and make sure that you get the expert advice if you need it. To really understand the infrastructure that you need in order to safely ingest that data, whether it's a ring-fenced GPT or whatever you decide to do as an organization. But it's at the end of the day, it's about making sure that you as an organization have that comfort and that trust.
But are they? I mean, are organisations, generally insurance companies, banks, are they putting those guardrails in place?
I think they will be very, very conscious about the potential pitfalls of getting this wrong. Not only from those two sectors are always very, very heavily under the microscope of regulators. So they will be probably on the more risk-averse side. But one of the things that's really interesting is if you look at some of these large AI companies, they're behaving like startups, which they are. Just because they have valuations of tens of billions of dollars doesn't mean that they're behaving like organizations of that structure. I mean, when ChatGPT 5 was first released, it had a bug that unintentionally indexed people's private chats to Google, so they were actually searchable and findable.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Now, that's obviously an organization that's moving and trying new things and pushing the boundaries, but when it's so widely adopted and you're dealing with so much sensitive information and so many people are relying on it, that's really when some of the concern starts to come in, is how actually safe are even the companies providing these services.
And I want to go to young people using AI for company, for therapy, that sort of thing. How are schools sort of protecting children or safeguarding them in that respect? I mean, a lot of it is done out of school, but it's all about education as well, isn't it?
I think everything. Our education can only obviously teach kids and learners the pitfalls and the dangers, but you can only show them the risk. You can't confine anything. It comes to policy and law, we're normally reactive. When it comes to policy and law, we're not proactive. So normally, ChatGPT,
We need
AI
campaigns, though, don't you think? You have these.
But you're reacting because it's already out there, and we know all the dangers already, and now we're trying to, see the danger. We're trying to put the policies and the safeguards in place to stop that danger, but it's already out there.
So you were talking about the policy earlier on, and you said it's still in its early stages.
In policy and education, again, it's going so fast. So where do you start? And again, a lot of this technology, it's so fastly being adopted by everyone. It's a very peer-to-peer thing where people are teaching each other. Now, without thinking about, you know, the pitfalls and the dangers and the risks that are associated by doing certain things using technology you don't fully understand. So that's where policy comes into play, and that's where safeguards come into play, that's where education comes into play. But when it comes, again, use of policy, again, strategies, there's so many. And now the EU's adapted one. Estonia's got a great education strategy for AI. China's embedded it in its curriculum from primary school all the way across. Singapore making actual qualifications aligned to industry needs in AI. The strategy could become so big. You've got to start somewhere. I think start is in the classroom and teachers using it for certain things, kids using it for certain things, understanding that it's a tool to enhance your learning, to make you more productive, but it's not. It shouldn't be a cheat tool again. And the maturity comes into play as well, where it's been used for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and we can't put it all on the schools as well. You know, parents have a responsibility. You know, our children are our responsibility as well. We have parental responsibility, or whatever family unit you're in. You know, so we can't just put it all on the teachers or all on the education system or whatever other system. You know, we all have a responsibility to know what our children are doing and how they're using and interacting with AI, and whether we've set boundaries around that and whether that's safe or not.
I think. Look, I think one of your panelists last week talked about regulation, and I think the suggestion was we don't need another regulator. And I would agree with that. But we're all regulated, or a lot of us are regulated in one shape or form, whether it's the Office of Fair Trading, whether it's Financial Services Commission, the LSRA or so on. So we have regulators in place. So I think we can cascade from that some basic rules, common sense rules, which don't have to be...
common sense rules or legislation,
Well, I think you can have a mixture, but you don't need too much, because it's basically about use of a tool. So if regulators create rules and policies, or the law that simply says you shouldn't use AI for bad purposes, you can go on to define what that means. But it's not preventing AI being used, but it's making sure it's used in the right way, and that feeds into anything.
Okay, but if I create an AI video that uses your image, which is not so easy to pick up that it's a fake, and I damage your reputation in some way, who is responsible for that? And how can legislation protect against that?
Well, I think that's the point I was making. So you should be responsible for that. I think
the creator, but you wouldn't know who the creator is.
Well, no, but what I was saying is that the person, look, it's like any crime, it can go undetected, but if a person uses AI to do some damage, you know, the laws are there about defamation or privacy or whatever. So it should be about making sure the person is responsible. You simply can't, and we certainly in Gibraltar are not going to be able to regulate what, you know, Sam Altman is doing, or Elon Musk, or whether, you know, did Google get this right? I mean, I'm not sure they're listening to what we're doing. So it's all about whether there can be laws that says, well, Ross Stengel shouldn't do this because it would be wrong. And it doesn't need to go further than that. It needs to be about our behaviour towards new technology.
Okay, and what about the platforms, Stuart?
The platforms are doing a little bit, yeah. So, for example, every video now from reputable platforms and every image has an invisible watermark that, you know, you can surface it to see whether something is a deep fake or something is actually produced by AI. So there is that technology there that exists to put watermarks in things. There are platforms, the kind of more popular ones that come from America, that have moderation. So if you try to use someone's likeness without permission, it will flag it. Obviously, it's not completely fail-safe because it hasn't got everybody's... So we're talking about sort of celebrities here. If you try to upload a celebrity, there was the cases a few years back where, you know, we all saw memes of Donald Trump and all sorts of things happening across the internet. Now, most platforms now have safeguards. If you try and use a celebrity's image, and it identifies it will block it. The same with music. If you try and upload something to basically imitate or replicate something that is a famous band, it'll stop it. But there are platforms that haven't got that yet. There are a lot of platforms in startup mode, and also some platforms that don't really have that level of care yet.
Okay, I've got some really good questions here about regulation, etc. So let me ask this one. We sort of touched on it already. Does the AI industry actually need regulation at this stage? Does anyone think it does?
Well, we already have the EU AI Act.
Right.
I know that Gibraltar's no longer in the EU, but it's relevant to Gibraltar firms who perhaps have clients in the EU or operate within the EU, and also high-risk AI categories in financial services.
Could you give us a rough, in a nutshell, what does the Act state?
So there's three main kind of components to the Act. Transparency, so you have to disclose AI use in any customer interactions. Accountability, which means your AI processes must undergo regular audits and reviews to maintain regulatory compliance. And bias mitigation, so steps to prevent discrimination. So, for example, if you're doing credit checks or anti-money laundering checks or even job application checks, there has to be steps taken to avoid that bias.
I mean, that sounds quite positive. Is that something, Nick, that you think that we should adopt here?
I think, look, the godfathers of AI, which, two or three that are come to mind, Jeff Hinton, Joshua Bedier, these are people who have been in AI. They in effect invented AI. And a lot of them have actually now talk about safety. And they're concerned with the threats. So when you have someone who's at that stage who has concerns, and a lot of them advocate some degree of control or regulation. So I think the answer is absolutely, we must. But I focus it on regulation of the use of AI, because we simply cannot even start to dream of what AI is going to do or how it's going to evolve. And we certainly can't be regulating, billion-pound, trillion-pound companies that are. It's just ridiculous. But what we can do is regulate the way in which we interact and use it.
It's a bit like crypto, isn't it? It's the same principle.
Well, it's exactly. That's not a bad example. I mean, Gibraltar was ahead of the curve in that one. I mean, we're not going to be ahead of this curve, but what we can do is say, well, if you're in Gibraltar, you can't use AI for the wrong reasons, and we can define them. But that's the easiest way, and we have the bodies in place to regulate, because they don't need new ones. They just simply need to say, there's a certain way that we can do it without going over the top. It needs to be something that allows us to be creative. Otherwise, we'll
you don't want to kill innovation.
No.
That's the point the questioner is also saying. Stuart, your views on this?
On regulation, well, I can take you back to when we were doing the cybersecurity stuff with the school children. I had the very similar issue where we thought we'd teach them how to be hackers. And we were showing them the ways that you could hack. We're teaching them how to stop hackers from penetrating the computer system. But everyone was under the impression that I was creating an army of hooded kids who could all go around hacking. It wasn't the case. But again, those are rules that we put in place in the classroom. Me and Jewis and Richard and the rest of the team at that time, we had rules in place because it could have got out of control. It could have easily have created a whole bunch of hooded hackers, but it didn't go that way. And the end it being Gibraltar was leading cybersecurity
they did
training.
So well. What's happening with all of that?
The academy's picked it up. I've got now Jared who runs 2 cybersecurity classes a week, so that's continuing. But my point is that, again, it's like Nick said, it's about the human. And we taught them how to be good within a field that could be very bad as well. So, again, I think it's about controlling the human and not trying to control the actual technology.
OK, I want to move on to a few other questions. What makes Gibraltar an attractive jurisdiction for hosting data centres and AI infrastructure? Both of you.
That's really not my field.
Not your field? Hugo?
I think, look, there needs to be some caution around that whole space, because that's been very hyped lately, and it's been very much in the news, all the data center construction that's happening all over the world. And obviously, space is a premium here, so I think that can be a challenge. But on the flip side, this has always been a jurisdiction, because of its size, because its creativity and that sort of entrepreneurial spirit. There's always going to be opportunities there, and I think that it's shown it. We've just mentioned on the DLT side, and I think that there's always going to be that opportunity when you are nimble and you are open to innovation, and I think that crosses over with the regulatory side as well, because you absolutely need regulation, but it can't be. It needs to be a fine balance that's struck between restricting bad activity, but also allowing the good activity to flourish and giving it the environment to flourish.
Ross, to some extent, it's what we've always done, and that is agility. Because we're small, we can adapt and can do it much quicker than anybody else. And it's a question of how we embrace AI, how we can, and also know what not to embrace. And I'll give you a very simple example. Booking a hotel in Cardiff to watch some rugby a couple of weeks ago through booking.com. Something went wrong. It wiped out my booking and took my money. I ended up on one of these call center things, and I ended up talking to an AI receptionist for 15, 20 minutes that got me nowhere. Then eventually one in Bangladesh and one in Amsterdam. After 2.5 hours, when you leave your phone there and you just sort of, I ended up sending a legal type of letter. And suddenly I got a Welshman ringing me up and sorting out the problem. And that really shows, and this is a hotel chain that had chosen to use AI and or outsource its reception. And actually, one of the things that we should do, despite embracing this technology, is make sure that people who come to Jib or interact with Jib, talk to someone in Gibraltar, talk to a Gibraltarian, make sure that they have that interaction so that we don't go to an extreme whereby you lose that, because that might be the USP, simply that actually we're using their technology, but you're still getting all the positives. And it's the agility that we have as a jurisdiction to move on this very fast, even if we're not ahead, even if in Japan or in China, but we could get there quickly. It wouldn't take long. Just trade, government, unions, everybody getting together, forming a plan and doing it.
I remember in the 80s when we were all using those ATMs, and that was all like real new technology, and this advert was someone really, really frustrated outside a bank trying to use this machine, and then he turns around and says, I just want to talk to somebody, and then the next scene is, hello, how can I help you? And it was that human interaction, and I think hopefully we will never lose that. We will always want that human interaction, no matter how far into the future we go to. I'd like to just ask you finally a question Natanya brings up, and she says, what would each panellist like to see over the next 3 to 5 years? AI literacy programmes, reskilling for finance, gaming, or university industry partnerships. What would people like to see in the next 3 to 5 years? Shall we start with Jo?
Okay, so in the world of AI, 3 to 5 years is a ridiculously long time. We're probably thinking about 3 to 5 months. I mean, the predictions from NVIDIA at the Davos conference last week were at the end of 2026, we're going to be moving to agentic super intelligence rather than just AI regular intelligence.
I haven't grasped this one yet.
Okay, which basically at the minute, in a nutshell, humans are on a higher level than AIs. Yeah, and what they're saying is at some point AI is going to supersede us humans and is going to become cleverer than a human being. And that's predicted to happen this year. They were talking about it last week at the World Economic Forum in Davos. I think what I would like to see in the shorter term, the next 3 to 5 months, is more collaboration. I mean, Nick just said, all the unions, everybody needs to get together. This is the biggest thing to happen to the workforce since the Industrial Revolution. I know Stuart says it's the 5th Industrial Revolution, but it really is going to impact the workforce. So we need to be on board collaborating. I think it's kind of happening to an extent. We saw the conference last week bringing people together. There's lots of training events, the university picking up events, private training providers, education systems. We're bringing a lot of training and education here, but it's still very fragmented. And I think we really need to collaborate more. Collaborate more and move forward together.
OK, let's go to Hugo. What would you like to see?
I think, and just to pick up on what you've just said, Jo, it becomes that it's that commonality in approach. It's various stakeholders, whether it's government, whether it's the education sector, whether it's private industry, actually working together towards a single goal. I think that should really be a mixture of teaching the next generation of the workforce critical thinking above all else. You should be able to leave the house without your phone and function. And also how to use these tools, and whatever tools are down the road. I think 3 to 5 years is absolutely a very long time. But how to use those tools to enhance effectively what your own capabilities. And I think that's that kind of approach of putting the responsibility on individuals, but enabling them to go and capture that knowledge. And as a jurisdiction, all be working towards the same goal, because as Nick said, you can absolutely get there. It just needs that focus and then that execution.
Okay, Stu?
So, I mean, a similar thing. I think really there's a real need for an awareness program for the employment sector, for people to kind of, I think, see what the potential is, what the opportunity is using AI. We talk a lot about the negatives, but there's a real opportunity. And I do believe people need to jump on that very, very quickly to not be left behind. So I think there's probably that awareness program, that more open conversation to say, look, you know, upskill, but upskill now. Don't miss the boat. Don't miss the opportunity, because this is moving so fast. The sooner you adopt it, the sooner you improve your chances of retaining your employment and upskilling yourself to perhaps even progress. You know, the other thing I would actually like to see is you know, I think Gibraltar is a fantastic place for something like even like an AI film festival. They're popping up all over the world, and I think Gibraltar would be fantastic for that, and something perhaps we could pioneer.
Well, maybe something that you can lead the way on, given your brilliant film has won 8 awards.
Yeah, for sure. Why not? Why not?
Let's go to Nick. Nick, what would you like to see?
Well, I agree with Joe, well, with everybody here, that we don't have 3 to 5 years, because this is advanced. I mean, sometimes they talk about singularity, which in essence is when we don't really know what's going to happen because the computers are cleverer than us. And depending on who you listen to, I mean, I was listening to a podcast with Elon Musk, 7th of January, he says we're there already. It's just at different phases in different countries, but we're there already. Now, I don't know if that's the case, but what I'd say is that we have a little time to have these sort of conversations. It's fantastic that you've had 2 in a row. I think the more we talk about it, the more we'll get there. And what I'd like to see is a coordinated campaign, primarily focused on education, but with a mixture of industry, government, forming a plan. But it's all about getting to know and learning what it is that we need to do over the next few months, more months than years, in order to make sure we're at least on the wave and not underneath it.
So an AI steering group made up of different sectors of industry in Gibraltar, something like that?
Yeah, with a real
Coordinated plan.
dynamic agenda that happens in a very short period of time. This is not a 2, 3, 4 years.
Sure. OK. And Stuart, last word to you. What would you like to see?
I think from an education point of view, and my background, probably more competitions, more to really engage young generations to use it, to use imagination. And I think the problem with AI, machine learning, automation, is that we lose ability to actually think and imagine and problem solve, and just, you know, become a bit of a robot, you said before. So to just give them the free rein, youngsters not so young as well, just to really take it to a competition level, just to experiment, show the world what you're doing, showcase. I think that would give a really cool flip side to it. Just the moaning of it's going to take my job. It's not going to take a job. It could make a job much more better, much more effective worker.
Yeah.
But I think we should be embracing it and not being scared of it.
Thank you so much. Some very positive messages. Joe, Nick, Stuart, Stu and Hugo, thank you very much for joining me on Viewpoint tonight. Plenty to think about. Let me just tell you a little bit about Viewpoint next week. Slightly different format. We're going to have a live audience. The topic is business after a treaty. On the panel, we have the Minister for Business, Gemma Arias Vasquez, Opposition MP Craig Saccarello, and we also have the GFSB and the Chamber represented on the panel. We're going to have a live studio audience that's actually made up from of members in the business community, and they're going to be putting their questions to the panel. Of course, we'll be getting lots of new information about what the treaty could mean for Gibraltar, for the economy, for jobs, for growth, for certain industries. It'll be fascinating, I'm sure. If you would like to be in that audience, email me at viewpoint@gbc.gi, viewpoint@gbc.gi, if you'd like to be part of the live studio audience in Viewpoint next Thursday. That's the 5th of February. Thank you very much for watching. Until then, good night.